Imagine you're like 16 years old, right?
Yeah.
You know your name, you know the city you grew up in, your native language, you know exactly who you are.
Right.
Your identity feels as permanent as well as gravity. And then you walk into a government office to just get your driver's license.
Just a normal Tuesday errand.
Exactly. But the clerk hands you this plastic card, and you look down at the nationality printed on it, and you realize that your entire life, up to this exact moment, has essentially been a typo.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Today on No Signal, we are looking at that specific, terrifying, and kind of liberating moment when your identity is just totally stripped away from you.
We are, yeah. We're exploring a very profound kind of ego death today because the core question we really want to pose to you, the listener, is this. How much of what you consider yourself is actually intrinsic to you?
Right.
And how much of it is just a reflection of the cultural room you happen to be standing in? And, what happens when you are forced to completely surrender that ego to the unknown?
Such a massive question. And welcome back to No Signal, everyone. We are picking right back up with our deep dives into Marcy's epic 2001 backpacking journey.
The Cross-Asia Trek.
Yeah. So he started way up north in Sapporo, Japan, hitchhiked all the way down to Kyushu, and we literally left him last time, practically collapsing off a ferry as he crossed the sea into Busan, South Korea.
Just completely exhausted.
Oh, completely. So today we're tracking his journey from the southern port of Busan up to the capital, Seoul. But before we get into the literal physical journey, I think we really need to build a bridge to where you, the listener, are sitting right now.
Yeah, because it requires a pretty serious mental shift to understand 2001 travel.
It really does. I mean, if you were listening to this on a smartphone, which you've probably checked, what, 5 times in the last hour?
At least.
Right, living in this hyper-connected, algorithm-driven world, I need you to view 2001 not just as the setting of this story, but almost as an antidote to modern life.
Definitely. There are no translation apps, no digital maps.
Nothing. When things get socially awkward or uncomfortable, Marcy cannot just retreat into a glowing screen. This era of analog travel, it required just raw vulnerability.
And it's a big contrast to how we travel now. In modern Western travel philosophy, there's often this instinct to dominate an itinerary. You want to conquer a city, maximize efficiency, and really impose your will on the environment.
Oh, totally. We optimize our vacation.
Exactly. But what Marcy is doing here is deeply rooted in an Eastern philosophy of surrender. He has to yield to the flow of his environment because he literally doesn't have the tools to fight it.
And man, that philosophy of surrender hits him like a literal brick wall the very moment he wakes up in Busan.
It really does, because he knows he needs to buy a train ticket to Seoul.
Yeah.
But he is absolutely paralyzed by it.
Yeah, he wants to buy the ticket a day in advance just to be safe, but he is too terrified of the language barrier to even walk up to the ticket counter. He just scouts the station, stares at it from a distance, and then wanders off to look at department stores near the Lade Hotel.
He's actively avoiding the one task he has to do.
It's like standing on the edge of a diving board, but deciding to just, look at the water for a day.
It's a brilliant look at how fragile our confidence actually is. Because back home in Japan, Marcy is articulate. He's incredibly capable. He hitchhiked the whole country.
Right, he's a survivor.
But stepping into Busan, he faces a massive psychological wall. And it's largely driven by the alphabet shift.
Oh, the writing systems.
Yeah. In Japan, he navigates using kanji. These are logographic characters, so even if you can't pronounce a word, you can often deduce its basic meaning just from the symbol itself.
Okay, that makes sense.
But Korea uses Hangul. And Hangul is this brilliant, purely phonetic alphabet invented by King Sejong back in the 15th century. But the catch is, if you don't know the phonetic rules, you can't even begin to guess what a sign says.
So he is rendered functionally illiterate in a matter of hours.
Exactly. He is totally helpless.
And his attempt to find, comfort in that illiteracy leads to some pretty incredible survival pivoting, or misadventures, really.
They're dumplings.
Yes. He wanders into a market, sees a dumpling stall, and thinks, perfect, I can just point at that and eat. He orders, only to discover they are pre-made, totally cold dumplings.
Ugh, cold dumplings.
And they don't even serve rice. So he's just standing there in a foreign market eating cold, starchy dumplings all by themselves.
Not ideal.
But, this is the thrill of the road, right? You fail, and you adapt. He keeps walking, finds a street cart, and points to a steaming bowl of thin udon noodles. And he's eating them with those flat metal chopsticks that are so distinct to Korea.
Which can be tricky to use if you aren't used to them.
Yeah. But he survives the day. which unfortunately forces him to finally face the train station the next morning.
And naturally, he oversleeps.
Of course he does. He sprints to Busan Station, and it takes him 20 agonizing minutes of just gesturing, pointing, and basically sweating through the language barrier to communicate with the ticket agent.
But the agent presents him with a really fascinating choice once they finally understand each other.
Yeah, he finds out he could take the Samulho Express train, which is sleek, fast, and will shoot him up to Seoul in about 3.5 hours. Or he can buy a cheaper ticket for the Mugunghwa-ho, which is a train that takes a slow, winding, 6-hour path up the peninsula.
And this is the first real test of that philosophy of surrender we were talking about earlier, because the modern instinct is optimization. Time is money. Take the express.
Get to Seoul as fast as possible.
Right. But Marcy chooses the Mugunghwa-ho.
He deliberately chooses the 6-hour train.
Yeah. He embraces the slower analog rhythm. He accepts a ticket covered in Hangul that he absolutely cannot read, finds his seat, and just lets the geography of the country dictate his pace.
He's literally surrendering his schedule to the landscape.
It's a profound shift from being a tourist to being a traveler.
Yep.
A tourist demands the environment adapt to them, but a traveler adapts to the environment.
I love that distinction. And that slow, kind of meditative buildup makes his arrival in Seoul so much more impactful. He steps off the train late in the afternoon, and the city is just vibrating with energy.
The contrast must have been wild.
Oh, completely. So he uses a public payphone to call his friend, Masayoshi. And while Marcy is standing on the street waiting for him, we need to pause and look at the invisible forces shaping the air he's breathing. Because Seoul in 2001 is not the glossy global K-pop and tech powerhouse that we all picture today.
Not at all. Marcy has walked into a country that is basically sprinting to rebuild itself from national trauma.
Yeah, give us the context here.
To understand the mood on those streets, you really have to look back at 1997. South Korea was absolutely devastated by the Asian financial crisis. Locally, it's known as the IMF crisis.
Right.
And it wasn't just a stock market dip, it was a sovereign default crisis. The national currency plummeted. It was so severe that the government launched a gold collecting campaign.
A gold collecting campaign.
Yeah, nearly 3.5 million regular citizens lined up to donate their personal wedding rings, gold necklaces, family heirlooms, just to help pay down the national debt.
Wait. Regular citizens were just handing over their actual wedding rings to bail out the country.
Yeah. They collected over 200 tons of gold.
Oh my God.
So that is the level of collective unity and just desperate rebuilding energy pulsing through Seoul when Marcy arrives just 4 years later. The country is under President Kim Dae-jung, who is pushing these monumental changes. He launched the Sunshine Policy, attempting to thaw relations with North Korea, which actually led to a historic summit in 2000.
Thawing a Cold War freeze that had been locked in since the 1950s. That's huge.
And culturally, Kim Dae-jung had just lifted a decades-long ban on Japanese culture.
Right, because of the history there.
Exactly. Because of the brutal history of Japanese colonization, things like Japanese music, movies, manga, they were all officially banned in South Korea for decades. That ban was only lifted starting in 1998.
Wow.
So Marcy, a Japanese traveler, is arriving in this incredibly narrow, optimistic window. It's post-financial crash right before they co-host the 2002 World Cup with Japan, and at the exact moment, cultural exchange is legally blooming.
It's a total historical pressure cooker. So Marcy reunites with Masayoshi. They originally knew each other from Hokkaido back in Japan, but they drop Marcy's bags and head straight out for Korean BBQ in Seoul.
Best way to start a trip.
Oh, absolutely. They are marveling at the cheap prices, the endless side dishes. Masayoshi is teaching Marcy how to wrap the grilled meat and kimchi in salted Korean seaweed. But the real culture shock of the night doesn't happen at the restaurant. It happens when they leave.
It's a shared taxi.
Yes. This detail is wild to me. So they jump into the back of a taxi to head to their next destination. They're cruising through Seoul, and suddenly the driver just pulls over to the curb, rolls down the window, and picks up a completely random stranger who happens to be walking in the same direction.
Just a totally unrelated guy.
The stranger just climbs in.
There was no rideshare app calculating this either. It was an entirely organic, analog optimization of space determined entirely by the driver.
I try to imagine doing this today, and my brain just violently rejects it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, imagine you are in the back of an Uber, you've got your AirPods in, and the driver just pulls over and lets a stranger climb into the back seat right next to you.
People would freak out.
Oh, they'd call the police. Our entire modern lifestyle is built around purchasing a personal bubble.
Right.
We pay extra money specifically not to perceive other people.
We really do. We construct these artificial environments where we are the sole protagonist. But that 2001 taxi mechanism, it completely shatters the illusion of total control.
Right.
You are forced into physical intimacy with a stranger. You share the air, the heat of the car, the bumps in the road. It forces an awareness that you are part of a collective civic organism.
Yeah, you aren't just an isolated atom moving from point A to point B.
Exactly. You're sharing a finite space in a recovering city. It's a total surrender of your physical boundaries.
So in that taxi, Marcy realizes his physical environment is entirely out of his control. But when he actually looks at his friend Masayoshi, he realizes Masayoshi has surrendered something much bigger than just physical space. He's surrendered his entire past.
Yeah.
And this is where we get to the absolute craziest twist in this entire deep dive.
Masayoshi's backstory is just, it's a profound case study in the architecture of identity.
Let me set the scene for everyone. Marcy met Masayoshi about 3 years prior in Hokkaido. Masayoshi was from Yokohama. He was this energetic, slightly rebellious 16-year-old kid who was completely obsessed with mogul skiing.
You live for it.
Yeah, every winter he traveled all the way to Hokkaido just to train. He was, to Marcy and everyone else, just a typical Japanese teenager living for the snow. But now, it's 2001, and Masayoshi's completely quit skiing.
Given it up
He
entirely.
gave up the sport he loved, moved to Seoul, and is intensively studying the Korean language. Why? Because of a driver's license.
The revelation at the DMV. This is where it gets crazy.
Right. So back in Japan, Masayoshi went to get his driver's license. He fills out the paperwork, passes the test, and they hand him his brand new card. He looks at it, and under the category for nationality, it doesn't say Japanese, it says Korean.
Because he is a Zainichi Korean.
I have to pause you right there because from a Western perspective, this sounds functionally impossible. Like, how can a 16-year-old kid living in a modern, hyper-documented society like Japan not know his own nationality? Didn't he have a passport? Didn't his parents tell him?
Well, to understand how that happens, we really have to look at the invisible architecture of Zainichi assimilation.
Okay, unpack that for us.
So Zainichi literally translates to staying in Japan, and it refers to ethnic Koreans who reside there. During Japan's colonial rule of Korea from 1910 to 1945, hundreds of thousands of Koreans moved or were brought to Japan as laborers.
Right.
After World War II, when Korea was liberated, those who remained in Japan were stripped of their Japanese citizenship. They became legally classified as foreigners in the very country they had helped build.
So they were essentially stateless.
Essentially, yes, until they navigated the complex processes of South or North Korean affiliation later on. But here's the key part. To avoid severe societal discrimination in employment and housing, many Zainichi families adopted asume.
Asume.
Yeah, a registered Japanese alias. Over decades, a family might use their Japanese name exclusively in public. So by the time you get to a third-generation kid like Masayoshi, his parents might speak only Japanese, all his friends are Japanese. He goes to a Japanese school under Hisume.
And the family simply never travels abroad, so he never needs a passport.
Exactly.
Wow. It's like looking at the source code of a website you've run for 16 years, only to realize it was programmed in an entirely different language than you thought.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. His daily outputs, his skiing, his slang, his hometown, they were all Japanese. But his foundational legal code was Korean.
And discovering that clearly triggered a massive spiritual crisis.
It did. He realized he was chasing a ghost. So he surrendered his known trajectory, dropped the skis, and moved to Seoul just to figure out what that word on his plastic card actually meant.
He chose to actively step into the hidden realm of his identity.
Yeah.
And what happens when he steps into that room becomes wildly apparent in the final part of their evening. Because after the taxi ride, Masayoshi gets a call on his cell phone from his hyung.
Hyung is the Korean term used by males to address older brothers or older male friends.
Right, so the hungs invite them out, and where they go? To a PC bang, an internet cafe.
The digital frontier.
Exactly. We talked about analog travel, but this is where the analog journey violently collides with the digital frontier. Japan in 2001 was largely still grinding away on slow dial-up internet, but South Korea, the government had aggressively subsidized high-speed broadband. By late 2000, Korea already had over 10 million broadband users.
They were light years ahead of everyone else. The infrastructure was a total paradigm shift.
Marcy and Masayoshi walk into this upscale PC bang, and the contrast is just jarring. I mean, for you listening right now, the internet is invisible air. It's everywhere. But in 2001 Seoul, the internet was a physical destination.
You had to travel to it.
Right. These PC bangs were windowless rooms, totally disconnected from the day or night cycle outside. They cost something incredibly cheap, like $1 or $2 an hour.
And the floors basically functioned as giant ashtrays.
Endless supplies of instant cup ramen, and the room was just filled with the frantic clicking of mice as people played online multiplayer games, which at the time was an absolute novelty.
It's an overwhelming sensory environment. But inside this room of cutting-edge technology, Marcy witnesses an incredibly ancient social mechanism take over his friend.
Yeah, so Marcy is sitting at a computer spending an hour just trying to install Japanese fonts so he can check a single email.
The struggles of 2001 tech.
Oh yeah, and he glances over at Masayoshi and he is just stunned. The rebellious, carefree mogul spear from Hokkaido has vanished. In his place is this fiercely polite, subservient junior. Masayoshi is surrounded by his Korean seniors, and his entire physical demeanor has literally shrunk in deference.
He's making himself smaller. And this leads to the real climax of his transformation, the cigarette ritual.
Yes, this blew my mind. They eventually log off, leave the computers, and sit around a table to eat with these older hunks. Masayoshi decides he wants to smoke. Now, in the West, if you want a cigarette, you pull one out, you light it, maybe you awker the pack around.
It's a very casual, individualistic action.
Totally, but Masayoshi doesn't do that. Before he even touches his lighter, he goes around the table and individually addresses every single senior present, explicitly asking for their permission to smoke.
He is mapping his exact location in the social hierarchy before taking a physical action. But, the verbal request is really only half of it. What does he do with his hands?
This is the part that blows Marcy's mind. Once Masayoshi gets permission, he puts the cigarette in his mouth, but he uses both hands.
Right.
One hand brings the cigarette to his lips, and his free hand reaches across his own chest to cup and support his smoking arm right below the elbow. He is physically cradling his own limb.
Let's break down the mechanics of why that happens, because it's not just good manners, It is structural ego death.
How so?
Well, in the Korean language, you literally cannot construct a sentence without first establishing rank. The language uses different verb endings, casual banmal for juniors, and polite gendaitmal for seniors.
So you have to know who is older to even know how to conjugate your verbs.
Exactly. Add to that the deep Confucian roots emphasizing respect for elders, and the culture of mandatory military conscription for South Korean men.
Which drills absolute rank-and-file discipline into the male populace.
Precisely. So the two-handed gesture supporting your own arm when pouring a drink, receiving an item, or in this case, smoking, is a physical manifestation of that grammar. It shows that you are offering your full attention and respect. You're literally using your entire body to perform the action rather than casually doing it one-handed. In that room, the individual ego must surrender to the collective order.
Right. The youngest person serves the elders, asks permission, and restricts their own physical space.
Masayoshi hasn't just learned some local customs, he has downloaded a completely new operating system for his behavior. The Japanese skier is gone. The Korean junior has taken his place.
It really is a complete synthesis of everything Marcy has experienced so far on this trip. I mean, Marcy surrendered his schedule to the slow train. They surrendered their physical space to the stranger in the shared taxi. And Masayoshi surrendered his very identity to this new cultural matrix.
Which brings us to the end of today's source material, really. But it leaves us with a fascinating corollary to consider.
Lay it on us.
We started by asking how much of your ego is dictated by the room you're in. We watched Masayoshi completely adapt his personality to fit the strict hierarchy of the PC Bang. But here is something new to chew on as you go about your day. If we are all just chameleons, constantly adapting our behaviors, our manners, and our egos to survive whatever cultural matrix we are dropped into, does the concept of an authentic self even exist at all? Or is authenticity just a privilege enjoyed by people who never have to leave the exact same environment their entire lives?
Oh man, that is heavy. Is authenticity just the luxury of never having your environment challenged? I love that. And speaking of environments, we have to leave Marcy right where he is for now.
Stuck in the internet cafe.
Exactly. He is sitting in a dark, smoke-filled PC Bang, utterly bewildered, surrounded by these wealthy, mysterious, older hunks that his best friend suddenly treats like royalty.
So many questions.
Who exactly are these seniors? Why are they spending their time in a cheap internet cafe? And most importantly, where are they going to drag Marcy next? Well, the dial-up tone is fading, and the journey continues in our next deep dive on No Signal.